Okay, so we spent some time talking about the equality of ourself and others in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. And we spent a good deal of time discussing the disadvantages of the self-centered thought. Okay, so remember, our self-centered thought is not us. So when we see its disadvantages, we're not hating ourselves. In fact, we see its disadvantages because we care about ourselves and we want to be free of that miserable, self-centered thought. And then we contemplate the benefits of cherishing others, how it brings happiness to our own mind, how it brings happiness to other living beings, and how it creates the cause for us to attain all the realizations of the Bodhisattvas and the Buddhas. Okay? And so that leads us to the next meditation, which is called exchanging self and others. In other words, right now, the one we cherish the most is me, and other people are secondary. Exchanging ourselves and others means that we exchange the places of who we cherish. So before we used to cherish ourselves first and others second, now we cherish others first and we put ourselves second. Okay. Now, is there one part of you inside that's screaming, wait a minute? What are you talking about, putting others first and myself second? Yeah, is one part of you kind of saying that? Okay, so that's the self-centered thought. So when we come back to that thought and we're saying, wait a minute, what about me here? Then we have to go back and think about the disadvantages of the self-centeredness and the benefits of cherishing others and seeing that we actually are helping ourselves by giving up the self-centeredness. Okay, we're benefiting ourselves by benefiting others. And it's true, isn't it? Yeah? When we treat others with kindness, we create good karma. Who experiences the result of the good karma we create? We do. Okay? So when we benefit others, we're also benefiting ourselves. When we harm others, we create negative karma, we're also harming ourselves. So this is a very big reversal of how we look at things. So exchanging self and others, it doesn't mean I become you and you become me and, a confusion of identity. It's not like that. What it means is that, we're going to put other living beings as very important in our lives. And our self-centered thought, we're going to put as second. Okay. Why should other sentient beings be important in our life? Because our entire life depends on it. Okay? If you look, everything we have, everything we know, everything we do comes because of the kindness of others and due to the influence of others. We know how to speak because when we were little, our parents sat there and went goo goo gaga in front of us, so we learned to pronounce all the syllables. Okay? When we were in school, our teachers taught us. That's how we know how to read, how to write. Yeah? So all the skills we have as adults, all the talents we have, it all came because others taught us, others encouraged us. If it hadn't been for people teaching, encouraging us, we would kind of be like wild animals. Yeah? Now you're going to say, oh no, never, never. Well, I remember being in Bodh Gaya, India one year, and they had found one little girl. I think she was about 4 years old, and somehow she had been staying with a pack of wolves instead of with her human mother and father, and she was acting like a wolf. So she got the benefit of the kindness of the wolves who taught her how to behave like a wolf, but she didn't learn how to behave like a human being. Yeah? So when we look at our lives and the advantages we have as a human being, it really comes because of other beings. And then in addition, to attain enlightenment, we have to develop the bodhicitta. The bodhicitta depends on having love and compassion for each and every living being. If we leave out even one sentient being from the sphere of our love and compassion, then it becomes impossible for us to attain Buddhahood. Think about that one, okay? Because have you ever heard of a Buddha who can't stand one sentient being? Yeah, think about it. Yeah. You ever heard of a fully enlightened being who's still hanging on to a grudge against somebody else? Impossible. Impossible. Okay? So we have to give up all these grudges, all this self-centeredness, all this part of ourself that wants to push other beings away. Okay? And instead, really welcome other sentient beings and see that our enlightenment as well as our happiness this life depends on them. When we see that and understand that deeply, then it becomes much easier to be kind to others. Yeah, because we feel so close to them. We see how, everything depends on them. Now you might say, but wait a minute, you don't know this person who harmed me. Okay? I've been hurt like nobody's ever been hurt before in the whole universe. People have hurt me, people have betrayed my trust, people have been mean and cruel to me, and no one in the entire universe has ever experienced such injustice and such harm. That's the way we feel when we look at the harm we've received, don't we? I hurt more than any sentient being in the whole wide universe. Is that true? Is that true? Yeah, that the mean things that you've experienced, nobody else has ever experienced anything like it? I think we exaggerate our own problems a little bit, don't you? No? When we look, anything that happens to me is such a big deal. We really exaggerate it. But when we look with a big mind, it's like, we've all experienced hurt and pain and betrayal of trust and, all these kinds of things. It's not like we hurt more than anybody else. It's just we pay more attention to how we hurt and we ignore others. But in actual fact, there's other beings who have really suffered much more than we have. Okay, so we begin to really see the kindness of others and put other sentient beings first, and really cherish them. When we do that, the more we practice cherishing others, the happier we feel. Because the more we cherish others, then the more, whenever we look at any sentient being, we feel happiness. But the more we hold on to anger, then the more we look at anybody, the more we feel angry and upset and miserable. True or not true in your own life? True or not true? Okay, so having the attitude that sees other beings in beauty, that sees them as lovable, that sees how much they've done for us, that mind makes us so happy. Remember yesterday when I told you the maroon cashmere sweater story? Yeah, seeing the happiness on Sasha's face made me much happier than having a maroon cashmere sweater. And I lived very well after I gave it away. I didn't die on the spot from separating from my precious sweater. Okay, so we practice, really cherishing others in that way. And that leads us to another meditation that I mentioned briefly. I can't remember if it was yesterday or the day before. The Tibetan term is Tonglen, and that translates as the taking and giving meditation. So this is a meditation that we do in order to enhance our love and compassion. Yeah. So we do this meditation after we've meditated on equalizing self and others, after we've meditated on the disadvantages of self-centeredness, the benefits of cherishing others, after we've practiced exchanging self and others and cherishing others is very important. Then, to really cultivate very deep and very profound love and compassion, we practice this meditation in which we imagine taking on the suffering of others and giving others our happiness. So this meditation is the exact opposite of our current way of doing things. Our current way of thinking is, if there's something nice, I'll take it. And if there's a problem, you can have it. So this meditation is completely changing that. So the way we do this meditation is we visualize others in front of us. Or, when we start the meditation, we can even visualize our future self, like imagining ourselves when we're an old person. Or we can imagine 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 other people, or a certain group of people, or a certain realm of beings. And, we start small and then we can continually increase who the sentient beings are that we imagine. Okay? But we imagine. Let's start with ourselves. Imagine yourself when you're 80 years old. Can you get an idea of how you might feel at 80 years old? What your body would be like? What your mind is like? Yeah. My parents, my mom is 80, my dad's 86. It's really something watching them age and what they go through. Yeah? And so imagine ourselves being that old and going through that. Okay. And then we're just using ourselves as an example here. But like I said, we can, as we progress, we put other sentient beings in that place. Then we think about that suffering of our future self and develop compassion for that person who's so old and experiencing the misery of old age. And because we have very deep compassion, we imagine all of their pain and suffering and misery coming out of them as some kind of pollution or smoke. And we imagine that we inhale that. Yeah. That doesn't mean you start coughing in your meditation. Yeah. But you're just thinking that other suffering appears as smoke or pollution, something really kind of yucky. Out of compassion, you imagine taking that on. But as you take it on, okay, it becomes like a thunderbolt. Okay? And at your heart, You know how when we're very selfish, when we're very miserable, it feels like there's a stone at our heart? You ever felt that way? I mean, you can physically feel it sometimes when there's a lot of self-centeredness. And why do we say we have a heavy heart? Yeah, I'm not talking about our beating heart. I'm talking about in the middle of our chest, our heart center here. Okay? So we imagine our own self-centered thought, which is our real enemy that makes us miserable. We imagine it there as like a rock, something really solid. And we imagine taking on others' suffering with a feeling of compassion. Their suffering comes out as pollution, it changes into this thunderbolt, and that thunderbolt hits at this lump at our heart, this rock of our own self-centeredness at our heart, and it completely demolishes it. Okay, completely. So then there's no rock at our heart. There's no big hindrance at our heart. Our heart feels completely open. Yeah? So we've taken what other beings don't want, their suffering, and we've used it to destroy what we don't want, our own self-centeredness. Okay? So this is a very important process. It's not that we just take on others' suffering and then sit there with it. Okay, because that doesn't do much good. You take on everybody's suffering and then you just sit there. What good is that? No, you use their suffering. It becomes the thunderbolt, and it destroys the cause of your own suffering, that self-centeredness and that self-grasping egoism, that self-grasping ignorance. And so then that's demolished and your whole heart becomes so open, wide open, very peaceful and very free. And you just stay in that state of openness, being totally free of any kind of grasping at a solid self. Okay? So you stay in that open space for a while. And then after a while, there's a light that begins to appear in your heart. And that light is the light of your own loving kindness towards others. Okay? So with compassion, we took their suffering. Now with loving kindness, we want to give them happiness. How are we going to give them happiness? We give sentient beings our body, we give them our possessions, and we give them our virtue or our merit of the past, present, and future. Okay? When we give our bodies, we imagine that our bodies are like wish-fulfilling bodies, and that they can emanate and become whatever or whoever other sentient beings need. So we send doctors out to people who need doctors, and friends to people who need friends, and janitors to people who need janitors, whatever it is. We imagine becoming that and sending that out, and so that other beings receive what they need. They receive the help they need in their lives. And so we really imagine that and think like that. Okay. Then we imagine all of our possessions, and we think of them as wish-fulfilling possessions, so they too can multiply and transform and become all the objects that sentient beings need. So whoever needs a washing machine, we send them a washing machine. And whoever needs a pair of socks, we send them a pair of socks. Okay, and whatever sentient beings need, we just imagine giving away our own possessions, and they become what others need. And then we imagine other beings receiving these things that they need. We imagine the people in Darfur receiving food and receiving clean water. Yeah, we imagine the people in Iraq receiving a safe place to live. Okay? We imagine people who are suffering with illnesses receiving medicine. So just thinking that we're able to give everything away and it becomes what others want, and they receive it and really feel the benefit from that. And then we also imagine giving away our virtue, our good karma. Yeah, and that we imagine as we give it away, it becomes all the conducive circumstances for practicing the Dharma. So for sentient beings who need meditation cushions, we send that out. For sentient beings who need Dharma books, we send it out. For beings who need Dharma friends, our virtue becomes Dharma friends. For beings who need Dharma teachers, our virtue goes out and becomes Dharma teachers. So we send out all the conducive circumstances, a nice place to practice, food to be able to sustain your retreat, whatever beings need so that they're able to practice the Dharma and attain the realizations. So we imagine giving away all our virtue and it becomes what they need, and they receive it and they practice it, and then we think that all these sentient beings now gain all the realizations of the gradual path to enlightenment. So now, instead of being angry sentient beings, they have the realizations of patience. Instead of being greedy, they have the realization of impermanence. Instead of being depressed, they have the realization of the precious human life. Instead of feeling forlorn, they have the realization of taking refuge in the three jewels. Instead of being confused about their ethical conduct, they realize ethical discipline. Yeah? Instead of having scattered minds, they all generate samadhi, single-pointed concentration. Instead of suffering from self-grasping ignorance, they now have the wisdom that realizes emptiness. So we imagine giving all the conducive circumstances away. Sentient beings receive them, and they gain all the realizations of the path and become fully enlightened Buddhas. So this is a very beautiful meditation because it starts out thinking of beings as suffering and it ends up with them becoming Buddhas. So if we start out practicing with ourselves, then like I was saying, we might imagine ourselves when we're 80 years old, the kind of suffering we're going to have, physical and mental and emotional, and suffering of aging, and suffering of being lonely or being afraid of death or other people ignoring you or whatever it is. And we imagine that we take that suffering away from our 80-year-old self. Yeah, so we take it away in the form of pollution. It becomes that thunderbolt which hits at the lump of our own self-centeredness at our heart. That completely is demolished, and we stay in that empty space, not grasping at a self. And then after a while, within that, there's a light, and that light radiates out, and as that light radiates out, we imagine giving to our 80-year-old self, that our body is able to, multiply and become whoever they need, that our possessions are able to multiply and transform and become whatever they need, that we give them our virtue and they have all the conducive circumstances to practice the Dharma. And then we imagine our 80-year-old self gaining all the realizations of the path and becoming a Buddha. And then at the end of the meditation, of course, you feel quite happy, don't you? Yeah. Okay, so we might start out with our 80-year-old self, and then after that, do the meditation for some friends or some relatives or for strangers. We might do it for, let's say, some people have a lot of compassion for animals. So you might think of various animals and do it for all the animals. Yeah? Or you have compassion for hungry ghosts, and you imagine taking on the suffering of hungry ghosts and giving them your body wealth and virtue. Or you imagine the dukkha, the unsatisfactory conditions of the gods, the celestial beings. Yeah. So we do this with all sentient beings, and it becomes quite a beautiful, beautiful meditation. Okay? So that meditation leads us to then generate the bodhicitta, because that taking and giving meditation makes our love and compassion extremely strong. And then when we have such strong love and compassion, we think, well, who can best benefit sentient beings? Who is capable of really being of the greatest benefit to others? And we see that Buddhas have that capability because they've eliminated all the defilements from their mind and developed all of the excellent qualities. And so they can have so many different psychic powers and abilities to do great benefit to others. And so therefore we too generate that very strong aspiration to become a fully enlightened Buddha for the benefit of all beings. Yeah? And so that's that bodhicitta motivation. Okay? If you want a much more in-depth explanation of the taking and giving meditation, one of my teachers, whose name is Geshe Jampa Tekchok, he wrote a book that's called Transforming Adversity into Joy and Courage. And it's a very wonderful book. And chapter 11 in that book has a very extensive explanation of the taking and giving meditation. So transforming adversity into joy and courage. It's published by Snow Lion in the US. Okay. Can you hold, is it about the title or his name? Oh, his name is Geshe, Geshe, Jampa, Jampa, Tekchok, Tegchok. Okay. He's the former abbot of Sarajay Monastery in India, and quite a wonderful teacher. And he's coming to Shravasti Abbey in April. I'm so happy about that. Okay, so we'll continue with chapter 3. So we had finished up to verse 21. And verse 22 and 23 combined together become the taking, the generation of bodhicitta and the taking of the bodhisattva vows. Some of you may do the 6-session Guru Yoga. If you do, you will recognize these verses and a few of the subsequent verses, because the text of the 6-session Guru Yoga extracted them from Shantideva's work. Okay, so we'll do verse 22 and 23 together. Okay, so just as the Sugatas of old adopted the spirit of awakening, and just as they properly conformed to the practice of the Bodhisattvas, so I myself shall generate the spirit of awakening for the sake of the world, and so I myself shall properly engage in those practices. Okay? So it starts out just as the Sugatas of old. Sugata is the English translation is those gone to bliss, or the blissfully gone ones. So it's another epithet for the Buddha, because Buddhas experience great bliss. So just as the Buddha, the previous Buddhas, when it says the Sugatas of old, that means the previous Buddhas, just as they adopted the spirit of awakening, in other words, the bodhicitta, okay? And just as they not only generated bodhicitta, but they also practiced all of the deeds of the bodhisattva, okay? So they not only had the wish to become a Buddha for the benefit of sentient beings, but they actually practiced the causes that would lead them to be able to attain full enlightenment, all the bodhisattva practices. So just as they did all of that, that's verse 22, verse 23 is saying, I'm going to do the same thing, okay? So verse 23 says, so I myself shall generate the spirit of awakening, the bodhicitta, for the sake of the world. And so I myself shall properly engage in those practices. So essentially what we're saying here is all the Buddhas, the previous Buddhas, were able to attain Buddhahood by generating the bodhicitta and then doing all of the bodhisattva practices. So I know that that's the path to Buddhahood, and just as they practiced it and achieved the resultant Buddhahood, I know that if I practice it, I too will attain the resultant Buddhahood. So I'm making the commitment and the determination now to generate the bodhicitta and to attain full enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. Okay, so that's the meaning of that verse. So it's a very, very powerful, these two verses are very powerful. And if you've already taken the bodhisattva vows, it's very good to take them again yourself every morning and every evening. And you can do that by visualizing the Buddha surrounded by all the other Buddhas and bodhisattvas in the space in front of you, and then reciting these two verses. Yeah? And then imagining that you're really retaking the bodhisattva vows and strengthening your bodhicitta. Okay, so these two verses are quite important. They're kind of like the essence of this whole chapter. Then verse 24 says, upon gladly adopting the spirit of awakening in this way, an intelligent person should thus nurture the spirit in order to fulfill his wish. Okay, so what this means is after we have generated bodhicitta in the way, by thinking as we have so far in this book, we've generated bodhicitta, an intelligent person would want to nurture their bodhicitta in order to fulfill their wish. In other words, an intelligent person isn't content to just say, I aspire to become a Buddha for the sentient benefit of sentient beings. But an intelligent person is going to nourish that aspiration and that wish so that it motivates them to do all the practices necessary to become a fully enlightened Buddha. Okay? The rest of the text explains all those practices. Okay? So here, until here, we've been generating bodhicitta, and then the rest of the chapters are going to explain how to actually practice in order to attain full enlightenment once you've generated that very noble aspiration. Then verse 25 is a verse of rejoicing. And it says, now my life is fruitful. Human existence is well obtained. Today I have been born into the family of the Buddhas. Now I am a child of the Buddhas. Okay? So what this is saying is today my life has meaning. Yeah? Everything that I've done in my life now has some kind of purpose, because it's led me to this point where I can generate this very, very noble mind of bodhicitta. So now my life really has some meaning because I've decided to dedicating it to the most noble thing possible, attaining enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. So we really rejoice, how wonderful that I've done this and how wonderful that my life now has some meaning, it has just exquisite meaning at this point. So we really rejoice. When it says human existence is well obtained, it means now there's a purpose for my having been alive all these years as a human being. There's now a purpose for my mom and dad having had me, and for my parents having had to go through so much difficulty to raise me as a child and feed me and teach me how to behave and give me an education. Now my parents sacrificed, and now there's a really great meaning behind the kindness that they showed me, because I've been able to do so meaningful with my life, like generating bodhicitta. So today I have been born into the family of the Buddhas. Okay? What this means is, just as a king and queen, have children, the princes and the princesses, that are trained to grow up and become kings and queens. So now, by generating the bodhicitta, and now as we continue to practice, we can grow up in the Dharma until we become fully enlightened Buddhas. Okay? So that's what it means in saying that we've become the child of the Buddha. Yeah, because children practice to, in olden days, when they had kings and queens and princes and princesses and things like that, then, you practice to become like your parents. So here, as the child of the Buddha, we're now going to practice in order to become fully enlightened Buddhas. Okay, so now it's like, we all hear about some other religions talk about being born again. This is the Buddhist version of being born. Except instead of getting born again in samsara, we're born again as a child of the Buddha, because we've generated bodhicitta. Okay, then verse 26. Thus, whatever I do now should accord with the Bodhisattva family, and it should not be like a stain on this pure family. Okay, so when you are part of a family, you know that your behavior reflects on the entire family. Yeah, and that if you misbehave, it causes other family members embarrassment. Okay, so out of consideration for them, then you behave properly because you cherish your family and your other family members. So here too, we're saying that, I've been born as a child of the Buddha. So now whatever I do should conform to the actions that the child of a Buddha should do. So I shouldn't act like a self-pitying, spoiled brat anymore. I really need to stop complaining. I need to stop whining. I need to, really start practicing as a kind person, because now I've taken this pledge to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, and I'm born into the family of the Buddhas, so I should act properly and not be like a stain on this pure family. So not go around, saying and doing all sorts of outlandish things that make people lose faith in the Bodhisattva path or make them lose faith in the Buddha Dharma. Okay, then verse 27. Just as a blind man might find a jewel amongst heaps of rubbish, so the spirit of awakening has somehow arisen in me. Yeah. So just, can you imagine a blind person? How likely is it for a blind person to find a jewel in a heap of rubbish? Very likely? No, very hard. So we're kind of here. So here we're kind of marveling that how incredible, somebody like me who usually is so overwhelmed by ignorance, anger, and attachment, I've generated the bodhicitta. It's like miraculous. So we're like the blind person, the heap of rubbish is like our samsara, our cyclic existence, all of our ignorance, anger, and attachment. And the jewel that the blind person finds is the bodhicitta. Okay, so we found this bodhicitta in the midst of our overwhelming suffering and confusion in cyclic existence. How incredibly precious and rare this is. So we should feel very happy after we generate bodhicitta. 28. It is the elixir of life produced to vanquish death in the world. It is an inexhaustible treasure eliminating the poverty of the world. Okay, so it refers to bodhicitta. It's the elixir of life produced to vanquish death in the world. When we generate bodhicitta, we have such strong intention to become a Buddha that it will lead us to freeing ourselves from cyclic existence. When we have freed ourselves from cyclic existence, there is no longer birth and death in this samsaric world. Okay, so that's what it means to vanquish death in this world. Yeah, we become we're on the path now to really being liberated from cyclic existence. Bodhicitta is like an inexhaustible treasure eliminating the poverty of the world. So we usually think, what would eliminate the poverty? Just print more money or give people gold or whatever. But that's not exactly it, because sentient beings suffer from ignorance, anger, and attachment. They suffer due to their own harmful karma. Yeah. So if we want to free them from suffering, to really free them from their mental afflictions and from all of their karma that causes rebirth. Okay, so the bodhicitta becomes like an inexhaustible treasure that eliminates the poverty of cyclic existence, so that it eliminates all the suffering, all the feeling of lack, all the discontent and dissatisfaction of cyclic existence. Okay, how does bodhicitta eliminate that? Well, in a person who generates bodhicitta, they have a very joyful mind because they have so much meaning and purpose in their life. And then by the force of this practice of the person who has bodhicitta, they will become a Buddha and they will be able to instruct other living beings on the path. And so they can instruct other living beings according to their own disposition, their own nature, explaining Dharma in a way that is suitable for each particular living being. Okay, so in that way, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are able to end the poverty of the world, end the misery of the world. Verse 29, it is the supreme medicine that alleviates the illness of the world. It is the tree of rest for beings exhausted from wandering on the pathways of mundane existence. So bodhicitta is the medicine that alleviates the illness of the world. Bodhicitta frees us from mental suffering. It helps us to create all the good karma that frees us from physical suffering. It helps lead other living beings on the path to liberation as well. So in that way, it eliminates all the illnesses of the world. It also becomes like a tree for rest for beings exhausted from wandering on the pathway of mundane existence. So when you think of sentient beings, we're always getting born and reborn and born and reborn, and we have this life and the next life and the next life and the next life. And at some point when we see this whole situation we're in, we just have this feeling of overwhelming weariness. Like, what point is it to get born and reborn in cyclic existence? It just doesn't make any sense. Yeah, I'm exhausted by cyclic existence. I want liberation. I want enlightenment. So just as a person who's been walking a long time wants to rest under a tree, somebody who's been wandering in cyclic existence for a long time takes a rest under the tree of bodhicitta. Okay, bodhicitta becomes what shelters and protects them, where they can rest. Verse 30, it is the universal bridge for all travelers on their crossing over states of being. It is the rising moon of the mind that soothes the mental afflictions of the world. Okay, so travelers very often need bridges to cross over, chasms, to cross over valleys or rivers or whatever. So bodhicitta is like the bridge for all migrating beings who have been traveling in cyclic existence, who want to now cross the ocean of samsara and arrive on the other side, the other shore. Okay, the other shore being enlightenment. So bodhicitta is the bridge that takes them over this ocean of cyclic existence to the other side, the enlightened state. Bodhicitta is like the rising moon, when the moon rises in the sky. And when the full moon rises in the sky, there's such an incredible sense of peace and coolness and calm, isn't there? Yeah. I don't know how well you can see the moon rising in the sky in Singapore, because you have so many skyscrapers here, you can't see the horizon, and then sometimes it's cloudy. But at the Abbey where we very often have really clear nights, and when there's a full moon, you can watch the full moon just up over the horizon. Yeah, and we live in a very tranquil place. It's just very still, very quiet, and when the moon comes up over the horizon, it looks much larger than it usually looks when it's high up. And it's just incredible to watch the full moon rise like that. Yeah, and so the full moon has this very cooling, healing, peaceful energy, because it's so quiet and still. So in the same way, the bodhicitta is like this moon that comes up that just spreads peace and a very gentle light, and that eases the heat of anger and greed in the minds of sentient beings. It's a very beautiful kind of analogy. And so now whenever you look at the moon in the sky, think of bodhicitta. Yeah, to help you remember bodhicitta. Verse 31, it is the great sun dispelling the darkness of the world's ignorance. It is the fresh butter formed from churning the milk of Dharma. Okay, so another analogy, when the sun comes up, all the darkness of the evening dissipates. So in the same way, when the sun of the bodhicitta arises in our mind, it's going to make the darkness of our ignorance vanish. Bodhicitta doesn't directly counteract ignorance. It's only the wisdom that realizes emptiness that directly counteracts the ignorance. But the bodhicitta gives us incredibly strong motivation to meditate on emptiness and generate that very special wisdom. So it's in that way that bodhicitta is said to be like the sun that dispels the darkness of the world's ignorance, because it spurs us to meditate on emptiness. It's like the fresh butter that forms when you churn the milk of the Dharma. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever seen people churning milk, okay? But when you churn milk, and it takes a long time, you know, all the butter rises to the top, okay? All the fat of the milk rises to the top, and the fat, the butter, the cream of the milk is often coveted as, you know, kind of the nicest part, you know, because it's very rich, very smooth, like that. This is not for people who like non-fat stuff, okay? It's for people who like the really, you know, the fat, the stuff with the fat, okay? So this was written before we knew about cholesterol and everything else, okay? So it's the fresh butter formed from churning the milk of the Dharma. In other words, if you were to take all of the Dharma teachings and try and find, like butter is like the delicious part of the milk, you know, the cream of the milk. What is the most delicious part of all the Buddha's teachings? What's the creamiest, most precious part? You know, it's this bodhicitta mind, this aspiration for enlightenment. Okay? Then, verse 32, for the caravan of beings traveling on the path of mundane existence and starving the meal of happiness, it is the feast of happiness that satisfies all sentient beings who have come as guests. Imagine all these sentient beings, you know, caravans of sentient beings who have been revolving in cyclic existence, travelers, migrators, up and down and up and down and up and down in cyclic existence. And they've been traveling so much, starving for happiness, okay? Just like all the sentient beings around us, we're starving for happiness. So bodhicitta becomes like the meal that you invite all these starving, weary travelers to come to. Okay? So all these beings who are starving for happiness in cyclic existence, you invite them to this incredible banquet of bodhicitta, because the bodhicitta is going to bring them all the happiness. Your generating bodhicitta is going to enable you to benefit so many living beings who never would have been able to receive benefit before. So you're inviting them to this banquet at which they can get nourished. Okay? So you're inviting all the sentient beings to come to this banquet. I'm going to serve you bodhicitta where you will such a delicious meal that will bring you great happiness. Okay? And then verse 3, today I invite the world to sugatahood and temporal happiness. May the gods, asuras, and others rejoice in the presence of all protectors. Okay? So here we're saying, you know, today I'm taking responsibility. I generated the bodhicitta. I'm inviting all these sentient beings who are weary and exhausted and starving for happiness, inviting them all to sugatahood, in other words, to Buddhahood. And I'm inviting them all to this feast where they can also have temporal happiness, because now with the bodhicitta, I'm going to work for their temporal happiness and I'm going to work for their Buddhahood. So their happiness is all the happiness that sentient beings have while they're still in cyclic existence, revolving in all the different realms. And then their ultimate happiness is the happiness of liberation and enlightenment. So by generating bodhicitta, we've decided that we're really dedicating this life and all of our future lives to this noble, highest, and miraculous state of being and purpose and meaning. And we're inviting all the sentient beings to come and partake of this, okay? And so may the gods, may all the devas, the celestial beings, may they rejoice. May these are the demigods, may they rejoice. May all other living beings also rejoice. And may we all rejoice in the presence of all of the protectors, in other words, in the presence of all the Buddhas. So this chapter ends on a very uplifting note, doesn't it? You know, we've generated bodhicitta, we've made our lives meaningful, we've invited all sentient beings to this feast of happiness, you know, to celebrate with us, because we have now become a child of the Buddha, and we're going to grow up and do the work of a Buddha. Okay. So that's the conclusion of chapter 3. Next time we'll start on chapter 4. Yeah? So between now and next time, I really study the first 3 chapters, okay? Don't forget what you've heard. Because this is really, you know, this text is so precious, so beautiful. And it's one of the greatest of the Mahayana teachings, you know, really quite special. And as we progress and we keep deeper into the other chapters in this book, you'll really see how just amazing Shantideva is, you know, when he wrote this book. Okay, so now we have a time for some Q&A. Okay, so this is this person said they've attended many of my Dharma talks and that they meditate regularly, and they've been reading His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And they have a question, which is about being a vegetarian. And, you know, one of the precepts says not to kill, but if we meet, doesn't that mean that killing the animals? And so that's one question. And a second question is how to encourage people to become vegetarian. Okay, the way that they usually speak of the first precept regarding eating meat is don't eat meat if you kill the animal yourself, or if you ask somebody else to kill it for you, or if you know that somebody has killed it specifically for you. In other words, if there's some personal involvement in the death of the animal, don't eat meat, which actually means don't kill the animal, you know, or ask somebody else to do it for you. Okay? Now, the question comes, well, what about if you didn't kill the animal? Somebody else is just packaged and sitting in the supermarket. My personal feeling in that is that it's not completely karma-free. Okay? Because of supply and demand, you know. If you buy meat, although you weren't personally involved in a being getting killed, somehow, you know, it creates the demand for more beings to be killed, for more meat to be produced. Okay? So I would recommend, if you can, to, you know, to not eat meat, unless you have to for health reasons. And in that case, you know, really pray for the lives of the beings who are giving up their lives so that you can eat meat. Yeah. I was raised in a family where we ate meat a lot every day. And one time when I was traveling, I was in Germany, and we got some sausage, and we were cooking it, we were camping, and then afterwards, you know, we cut into it to eat it, and all this blood came out. And it was at that moment that it really hit me that when I eat meat, I'm eating somebody else's body. And I thought, would I want to die so that somebody else could eat my body? No. And then the question came, well, why should I ask other living beings to die so that I can eat their body? So if you can become vegetarian, it's very good. If you can't, then do pray for the well-being of those animals and fish or whatever that have given up their lives so that you can eat. Okay? I think that answers the questions well enough. Okay. Okay, so somebody's been reading my book about Tara, the book that's called How to Free Your Mind. And in the book, it says that you can pray to Tara for wealth, and that Tara will grant you wealth. And so this person is saying, wait a minute, we're also encouraged as Buddhists not to be attached to wealth. So why are we praying to Tara to us wealth? And then the person says, actually, one of my friends has been praying to Tara for years for wealth and still doesn't have it. So why hasn't Tara granted their wishes? Okay, so to answer this, when it says that Tara grants wealth, it doesn't mean just physical wealth, okay, money and material possessions. The real wealth is the wealth of the Dharma. So when we're praying to Tara and making requests for wealth, we want our mind to be rich with the Dharma. We want our mind to be rich with renunciation, rich with wisdom, rich with patience, love, and compassion. Okay? You can also request Tara to help with material things or with worldly things. But when you do so, you need to have a very good motivation. If you're just praying for wealth so that you can be rich and famous and lie on the beach all day and not have to work, that's not a very good motivation, okay? So this is, you know, if somebody prays to Tara for wealth, it's, for example, I want to be able to practice the Dharma, and I need some savings to be able to go on retreats. Or, for example, a monastery or a temple, that wants to expand to make it able so that other people can come and practice the Dharma there. So you request Tara to please help also on a mundane level. Okay? So the motivation is one that's not selfish, and it's for the benefit of various living beings. Okay? And so sometimes we may pray for this and our wishes are not granted. Well, that's because we haven't created the karma to receive wealth. Okay? So it's not that Tara or any of the Buddhas are some kind of creator God, and if we please them, then they'll give us a lot of money. The basic tenet of Buddha's teachings is cause and effect. That the results we experience come due to the causes that we create. So if we want wealth, we have to practice generosity. If we don't practice generosity, then just praying to Tara to be wealthy, it's not going to work because we haven't planted the karmic seed in our own mind stream to receive that wealth. Okay? You want to write your questions? The 5 precepts don't include gambling. Does this mean that gambling isn't a negativity? No, gambling is something quite negative, okay? There are lots of things that are not included in the 5 precepts that are still negative actions that it's very good if we abandon. But I think the Buddha listed only 5 because those were the 5 most important ones. It doesn't mean that you can go out and gamble and lose all your family's wealth, okay? That's not what that means. Okay?
Like Buddhism, right, is about karma and cause and effect. That's one of the main tenets of Buddhism. Mm-hmm. But my question is, if you look at things like karma and cause and effect, right? If you look at things in the long run, it's mechanical. My question is, does grace have any place in that?
What?
Grace.
Grace.
Yeah, grace.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're asking about, there's cause and effect, and is there any room for grace? Okay, grace is not a word that you hear in Buddhism, okay? Grace is more of a Christian concept. In Buddhism, sometimes we talk about blessings, receiving the blessings of the Buddha, but blessings does not mean some kind of magical something. Yeah, receiving the blessings of the Buddha means that our mind has been transformed. Our mind being transformed happens not only because of what the Buddhists do, but because of what we do. Okay? So the Buddhist path very much teaches that we have to be responsible and we have to act. There are Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and holy beings who can help us, but they can't help us unless we do something. Okay? So we can't just sit back and go, Buddha, Buddha, Buddha! I want to be rich. I want to become a Buddha. Please make me rich and make me a Buddha by tomorrow morning. And in the meantime, I'm going to take a good long sleep. Okay, and you do all the work, Buddha. Okay, because I'm praying. That's not going to work. Okay, why? Look at that state of mind. Yeah, that state of mind is completely self-absorbed. It's not really caring about Buddhahood. It's caring about other sentient beings. It's not being generous. And so even though you pray, we have no water and fertilizer for, the Buddha to work with. So we have to create good karma ourselves, and then the Buddha's blessings can come into our mind and help to ripen that karma, and our wisdom and our compassion to ripen, and those realizations to grow in our heart. So somebody says, I prostrate when I'm in a temple, but I don't prostrate at home, where my mom has the Kuan Yin statue. So should I consider prostrating when I go home every day, because there's a Kuan Yin statue there? What I would recommend doing, and what I do myself, is every morning when I wake up, I imagine the Buddha and I make 3 prostrations first thing when I get out of bed. And every evening before I go to bed, I make 3 prostrations, and then I lie down to go to sleep. So that the prostrations frame your day. Yeah? You bow to the Buddha in the morning, you bow in the evening. So I would recommend doing that. If you have an altar or a statue at home, you can bow in front of it, because that picture or statue reminds you of the Buddha's qualities. You might find, particularly regarding this person's question, should they bow when they come home every day? You might find actually that when you come home from work, it could be a very nice practice for you to come in the house and bow to Kuan Yin, and then go about doing what you need to do. Because when you come in and you bow to Kuan Yin, you're remembering Kuan Yin's compassion. And so you're remembering, I want to be compassionate like Kuan Yin. And so that process of just remembering the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and their qualities can actually inspire our own mind and help us be kinder people when we're at home, dealing with our family and so on. So yes, I think you could certainly consider bowing to Kuan Yin when you get home each day. It's also a nice practice to make offerings if you have a shrine at home, to make offerings first thing in the morning. So, you're creating generosity by offering water, offering food, something like this. It's a very nice practice to do, and it cultivates a spirit of generosity in our own minds. If people want more information on this, in my book, Guided Meditation on the Stages of the Path, it talks about how to set up an altar, and it talks about how to make offerings. And over the weekend, when we have the Kuan Yin retreat here, if people want to talk about that a little bit more in depth. Okay, how do we apply justice and equality to daily life? Does justice mean equal treatment for all? That's difficult. Okay. Justice is an interesting idea. I never hear that word particularly in Buddhism, and I don't know of any Pali or Sanskrit or Chinese or Tibetan word that you find in a Buddhist context that translates as justice. I think it might be a very interesting idea to have a discussion about what we think justice means. Yeah, because there's many different ideas about justice. So somebody's saying here, does justice mean that equal treatment to all? Well, then does that mean that you treat an adult like you treat a child? Okay, does justice mean that kind of equal treatment? Yeah, that you treat an adult the same way you treat a child? I don't think so. Yeah. justice mean that you treat your teacher the same way as you treat your boyfriend? I hope not. Okay? So we still treat people differently according to the various social roles that we have, but equanimity, in the Buddhist concept of equanimity, means that we want everybody equally to be happy, and we want everybody to be free of suffering. In other words, we have favorites, saying that I want some people to be happy, but those people can suffer. Okay? Or these living animals and insects can be happy, and those ones can suffer. Yeah? So the kind of equanimity we're talking about in Buddhism is that kind of equanimity of really wishing everybody well. Yeah? But we do treat people differently because they are different. But we can wish them well and wish them to be free of suffering equally, although we may treat them differently because of the different social roles that we relate to them in. Okay? Okay, so then this person is saying, I see the importance of benefiting sentient beings, and that's very noble, but I don't see the importance of enlightenment. Why is attaining enlightenment a worthy aim, a worthy goal? That's because when we have attained the full enlightenment of a Buddha, we will best be able to benefit sentient. So if you see the importance of benefiting sentient beings, if you really want to benefit sentient beings, then it naturally follows to ask yourself, how can I best benefit them? Yeah. So does that mean that I just have to go to university and learn everything that they teach at university because sentient beings need all that different kind of knowledge? But then you say, who benefits sentient beings more, an engineer or the Buddha? If you're an engineer, can you lead sentient beings to enlightenment? Yeah? If you're a doctor, can you lead sentient beings to enlightenment? So we see that, all these other fields are very good, and you can certainly do something that benefits sentient beings temporarily in samsara. But in terms of leading sentient beings to enlightenment, the best way to do that, and really the only way to do that, is if we have become fully enlightened Buddhas ourselves. Okay? So if we really want sentient beings to have the happiness that is free from all of the suffering of being born in cyclic existence, then we have to path to enlightenment, and we have to actualize that path to enlightenment in our own mind so that we can teach it properly to others and so that we can guide them on that path. And so that's why attaining enlightenment is really important. Okay. Also, as a Buddha, like I was saying before, then you have this power to emanate many different kinds of bodies. And so then it becomes also much easier to benefit others because you can emanate many bodies that can teach them and guide them and lead them on the path. Okay. So that concludes this series of talks on A Guide to a Bodhisattva Life by the Indian sage Shantideva. And like I said, we'll continue next time I come, but you have to study and practice this between now and then. Will you do it? Don't expect me to come if you're not willing to practice. Okay? Really, because if you don't practice, why should I come and teach it? Yeah? I don't sit on a plane and get jet lag because I like it, okay? I do that because I have some confidence that you're gonna, take these teachings to heart and practice them and benefit from them, okay? So continue to practice. Yeah? So we're going to do a little dedication, and then it looks like we're going to have a little concert too. So we'll do the dedication first before the concert, okay? Due to this merit, may we soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.